Hey,
All
Michelle.
right. Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. Glad to be doing this. This is an interesting topic for me tonight. Welcome everybody to the Business Chicks podcast, where real talk meets real strategies.
Yes. And we're your hosts, Kim and Michelle. And we have over 60 combined years of experience in sales, marketing, leadership, speaking. And yeah, we're glad to be here with you.
Yeah, and on this show, we're going to cut through the noise and share the lessons, wins, and setbacks that have shaped our careers so that you can shortcut the learning curves in yours.
Yep. Whether you are climbing the ladder, building your own business, or whether you just want to kind of talk and hear about the things that are affecting us women today in life and business, you have come to the right place.
That's right. This is the Business Chicks
Business Chicks
podcast. So
podcast. Let's
let's get down to
down to
business.
business. All right. This is an interesting topic tonight for sure. And, one of the things that happened recently, you and I were talking about the other night, was the whole Kristen Cavett, Andy Byron, Coldplay drama fiasco. And one of the things that I found so interesting, well, not really interesting because it didn't surprise me a whole bunch, but still just interesting that it reinforced this idea, was that first of all, well, there are a couple of things, but first of all, the people were so much harder on her, on Kristen, than on Andy. And I found that interesting because he was the boss, like he was the CEO. So if you look at leadership, a lot of times, like we've talked about, being kind of a parent dynamic, he was the senior, right? So I feel like that the onus was kind of on him first and foremost to protect their working relationship and to kind of, set the boundary. So when everybody just really turned on her so quickly, and yes, he did resign, but so quickly, I found that a little surprising. But what was even more surprising was how many women were calling her out and saying things about her.
Absolutely. And you look at some of the things that they were saying about her were not about the affair. They were not about the situation. It was about her looks or how she was portrayed or, sleeping her way to the top. It was not about the situation at hand.
Right. Right. That
And they didn't do that to him. That I saw.
No, not the whole, I mean, the thing that I kept seeing over and over was, she doesn't look like her picture. She looks, like she's 60. She looks 10 years older than him. And he's got this beautiful wife at home. And why would he do this? And, it was really dragging her.
It really wasn't. First off, to say, well, he's got this beautiful wife at home, so why would he cheat? Does it matter whether she's beautiful or not?
Right. Well, and are we talking just beauty? It kind of goes back to some of the things that we've talked about. I mean, I very rarely, I don't even know if one time I saw anybody say, well, maybe she's brilliant and maybe he loved her mind, right? Didn't see that at all.
Right. Exactly. And again, as you said, it's other women too. So this is not just men throwing shade. We're doing it to each other.
Absolutely. That's what was so mind-boggling is I didn't really see women sticking up for her, like saying, well, what about him? Where was his responsibility? He was the CEO, he hired her, which actually puts her in the more tenuous position, right? So in general, if let's say that she had rebuked his advances, right? And maybe it was 100% completely mutual, but chances are, right? And I, supposedly, allegedly, in my opinion, just to keep me legally safe here, chances are, I feel like he probably made the first move. I don't feel like she would have done that with her just having been hired pretty recently, unless this was going on before she got.
Right. Right.
You know,
That's the
I
question. That's the part we don't know. And to be honest
right,
with you, to me, it doesn't matter on that
right.
side because
Mhm,
the affair itself to me is between those families.
mhm.
That's not our business. To me, it's
Right.
about the hierarchy of things and taking
Mhm,
advantage of a position he was in to be able to do those things and to be able to
right.
get away with them, and to be able, I mean, he had complete control, I'm certain, over when she traveled, if she
Mhm,
traveled, all
mhm.
of those things that factored into it as well. And again, I am not giving her a pass on any of
Right,
this. That
right.
is not what this
Yeah.
is about, right? But
Right,
this is
right.
about why is it, even in situations where, you know, let's just say his wife, and I don't know what her reaction's been, but in the big scheme of things, it is
Mhm,
a lot of times women blaming women for those
mhm,
situations.
mhm,
They're not just saying anything about the men because they, it appears that men, it comes across that, oh, men can't handle, they're weak
mhm.
in that
Right,
type of
right.
scenario.
Yeah.
So it's on us to do it. So
Mhm,
that's the part that really bothers me about this, is that we can't even, we're not even supporting each other,
mhm.
in that.
Yep. That's, hence the title of the show, can you
Mhm.
trust other women at work? And to me, that is a matter of trust because I am sure, right? There are people, well, okay, again, allegedly, in my opinion, I feel like there were people in that workplace, probably other
Mhm.
women that knew what was happening, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
instead of, I didn't hear anybody coming out in her defense, like, oh, well, he
Right.
pursued her, or, well, she does good work. She's a smart woman. I can see,
Mhm.
I didn't see any of that. I
Right.
didn't see
Right.
any of that supporting her saying, "Oh, well," I mean, again, allegedly, in my opinion, as I was telling you the other day, I feel like it probably wasn't the first time, right, that this
Right.
had happened, um,
Mhm.
with him, although, we haven't heard of other situations,
Mhm.
but looking at it from, again, not the affair itself, but just the position of power, right? And where
Right.
we're making
Mhm.
it harder on her than him. What if,
Mhm.
she had ended it or wanted to end it? That's,
Mhm.
he's in charge of her promotions, her pay,
Exactly.
everything. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of dynamics there that I felt like nobody was really asking, especially or even other women. And I think that goes to the
Mhm.
heart of one of the things you and I have been talking about is there's certain things that young women entering business, going up in their career need to be aware of is that these things rarely end good. This is a kind of like side adjunct topic to what we're talking about today.
Mhm.
Those things rarely end well. And it usually is the woman who is going to lose her position, kind of like we saw in our movie that we talked about.
Exactly. That's what I was just going to say. Just like last week when we talked about Swipe, right? Whitney Wolf Herd, who helped launch Tinder, but even she didn't fully have women's back in the beginning. But like we have to understand that because the app itself, when you think about the app itself, right, it made women compete for validation against
Mhm.
other women in the app.
Right. Hmm.
Right? So
Yep.
in business, we sometimes fall in that same trap where we're competing for limited recognition inside at the table, just like she
Absolutely.
was. And so I think
Absolutely.
that's why it's so relatable. It's a is it a survival in a male dominated space that we're carrying over into our personal?
I 100% believe that to be the case. And that's, and we saw Whitney learn from that, right? When she went on to
Mhm.
create Bumble, how she, made Bumble so that women had to initiate the first contact
Mhm.
and really put the power back in the hands of women. But going back to what you were just saying, when she got to the table, that is one of the things that we saw. Now Whitney learned and she did better and she
Mhm.
grew into, really a woman's woman. But she even admitted that when she got that seat at the table, she was afraid of losing it. And so
Mhm.
it, and, even listen to what I just said, when she got that
Mhm.
seat at the table, that implies
Right.
there is one seat or limited seat
Right.
at the
Right.
table, right? That one seat that
Mhm.
women get. When she
Mhm.
got that seat, she didn't want to lose it. Well, that was me just letting kind of my, I don't, it's not, I guess not biased, but upbringing and experience show, because I just said, just naturally, she got that seat at the table as if there is only one.
Right.
And, that's something I think is kind of at the heart of a lot of this, of why women can't always trust other women at work. I don't know that it's that we're all just shady out here, right?
Right.
But literally, we feel like we are in competition, that we are in a, eat or be eaten, dog eat dog world. And that if we are going to succeed, that means that someone else is not going to. Or if someone else is going to, that means that it's harder for us. And I don't know. I mean, I do know where that's coming from, but it seems like we should be beyond that. Don't you think?
Agreed. I mean, we're 2025, and I feel like we've had so many situations where we have all been, you have to support women, women have to support women. We've had so many people in positions, RBG, when I mentioned her last week, right? So many women in positions that have said, we have to support each other. But yet we don't still. And I'm not saying everyone.
Right.
I feel as if for our teams, you and I are very much a lift up sort of scenario. But why is it still in this day and age that it is so hard for women to not just come up, but bring each other up, to support each other and be that guidance that they need? And, take the younger generation and show them how that's done, when I feel as if even in college and on these dating apps and all of these things that they're living real time, these influencers, things like that, this is all about it's all about me, and we're still not supporting women.
Yeah. And it's, a little bit of competition is natural, right? Competition can, to a certain extent, it can drive us to do better, do more, do better things, bigger things, etc. But I still, my mind keeps going back to, like always, like you said, at our work, I feel like we're lucky. We do have a good group of women, and we have a supportive environment where it doesn't necessarily feel like you're vying for limited spots. But I think in the general scope of work, I really believe that it does come down to that. Like I said, it's not that we're all just, as all being the metaphorical all for women, we're not just all out here being shady and being cutthroat. There's a reason, right? There's a reason that we have gotten to that place, or that we haven't left that place, I guess I should say, is that we feel, and I think rightfully so, and we're going to look at a few numbers that still support that. We've talked about the number of women, in C-suite jobs. It's like, what, 3%, and those kind of things, I think, are what leads to it. Because if there is such limited, what we feel is limited open space for women, then of course we are going to feel like we have to compete and maybe not backstab, but look out for ourselves, right?
Correct.
Constantly looking out for ourselves as after number one, those kind of things, because we do feel and have seen through experience that those seats really are limited. So it's, it's a thing, right? And so I had mentioned to you, I went and looked on TikTok and I searched women in business. And what I was really surprised by were, of all the top videos, there were three kind of big themes, right? There was very few, and I don't even know that I saw one about just, here's tips for women in business. It was more women starting their own business. Here's how to be a boss babe. And, then what you and I have also talked about, the struggles between how do you balance career and motherhood, and which I didn't go search, but I bet you if you search men in business, that is not going to be a topic, right? That is not going to be a thing. And then stories about other women being unsupportive. And so it's like literally the three things that we talked about the most are what I saw popping up. Women starting their own business, which implies to me that that's one of the only ways women feel like they can get ahead, is to start their own business. And we've talked about that. And then again, balancing career and motherhood, and then stories about other women being unsupportive. That kind of blew my mind. Does that surprise you that those were the three kind of common topics?
Well, I'd like to say it surprises me, but that's not genuine for me to say it surprises me, just because I see it. I don't understand it, but I
Mhm,
see it. And that's the part that boggles my mind for sure, about why are we still here? Why are we still at this
mhm.
point? You know?
Yep. And here's one, this one really struck me or stuck out to me. And come to find out, I'll just let it play with the music here for a second, just so we can see the full effect. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
Surely that's not true. And honestly, it's actually not completely accurate. And so I'm going to share a page where, but it's close, So
Hmm.
when you saw that statistic, I'm one of 11. The girl saying I was feeling down at work until I
Yeah.
realized I was one of 11% of, you know, I was one of the 11% of women
Hmm.
earning over $100,000. How did you think that was true? I
So
was shocked.
I wasn't, I mean, I didn't know if it was true, honestly, off the
Mhm.
bat, but it caught me on two levels. Honestly, like, I was having a bad day until I realized how good I was compared to other women.
Yeah.
Instead of just,
Yep.
I was having a bad day and then I realized, you know what? I'm a badass. Like, I
Mhm.
mean, again, I was having a bad day until I
Oh, I
compared
didn't even
myself
think
to
about
other
that.
women. So
Right,
that's
the
where I
compare
went with it too. Right.
I didn't even think
Mhm.
about that. That's an
Mhm.
interesting perspective because I definitely
Mhm.
didn't think about that. I was just kinda
Mhm.
like, "Oh, that's sad," but you're right. It's at the heart of what we're
Mhm.
talking about. It's in
Right.
relation to, oh, thank goodness I'm one of the ones, right? I'm one of the
Right.
ones that has these
Right.
oh, good point, has these
Yeah.
scoring these scarce positions. Ah,
Right. The
interesting.
scarcity part, right? So
Mhm,
that's where that mind went, of whoever put that together,
mhm.
automatically went to, well, I was having a bad day until I realized I'm in this, I'm
I'm
at
doing
the
better than
table.
other women, right?
Right. You're right.
That's
Not
crazy.
the I was having a good day until I realized that only 11% of women, when you think about how many of them have college degrees,
Mhm,
how many people are highly professional and things like that, only 11%? Like,
mhm.
yeah.
Well, and it leads into all kinds of problems. Like this article here says, right? Here's why women have a harder time building wealth. That's a whole other topic, that we could get into. There's so many reasons
Mhm.
why women have a harder time building wealth, but like CNBC is saying, it all starts with income level. So
Right.
most Americans say it takes a six-figure income to make ends meet amid rising prices. And I would say that that's close to being true. I mean, I think I've told you,
Mhm.
my oldest son is finishing up his master's degree in psychology. He's working as an addiction counselor at a prison, at a state prison, which, I think is just a hugely valuable job, right? Well,
Absolutely.
by the time you take his starting salary, which, it's a government job. So I guess I can say it because it's out there online. It has to be because it's government. It's about like 36,000, I think.
Mhm.
Well, by the time you take that, take out health insurance, take out state tax, take out federal, it's you could earn more money probably, as a manager at a and I'm not even talking like director manager. I'm talking like shift supervisor, right? At
At a
a
fast food
beauty store.
place.
No insult to that. My point is though, you're getting a
No.
master's degree, you're
Correct.
taking on, in most
Mhm.
cases, the student loans, you're taking on those things.
Mhm.
And so if you look at the fact that it says that, and I'll get to here in a second, but like for example, in California, I think it's 30% of women make six figures above, and rent for a one bedroom is like 4 grand in California.
Mhm.
So you probably have, in order to survive, you're having roommates after you've
Correct.
got your first, $80,000
Mhm.
job. You're still going to have a
Right.
roommate. And
Right.
so
Mhm.
it's just, New York. In New York, it's 20%. In New York,
Mhm.
20% of the women make above six figures. It's like, what? New York is the same way. How are these?
Mhm.
How? How are women surviving, much less thriving? And then, we wonder, again, we, the metaphorical, we wonder why women are competing with each other, why
Right.
women feel like, that sometimes they have to compete hard and, if not backstab, not help other women, right? And it's right here, 72% of six-figure earners are men. So it wasn't as bad as 11%, but 28% of six-figure earners are women. And for the majority of that percentage, it does come in those bigger cities like Washington, D.C., where cost of living is just astronomical, right? And it says for every woman who makes at least 100,000, 2.5 men do. So again, I would say, yeah, scarcity, the number of seats at the table available for women, that 3% of CEOs, that I think it was 17% of, senior director positions, that's contributing to that, because until we get that, if not equal, right? It's not probably going to be equal in our lifetime, but until that gets better, then it's going to continue to be a problem. Because as it says right here, women are always playing catch up. It's like we bear the brunt of low wage jobs, and those low wages translate to a lifetime of being behind when it comes to building financial security. I mean, like you said, the gap persists despite women's increasing levels of education, and even widens among higher income workers. So, I mean, what do we do? It says right here, by the time they retire, women have 30% less saved. What? Why are we still here?
Right. And I think part of it, why we're still here is part of what we talked about previously in other ones, is we have got to learn, and the younger generation has to learn to negotiate upfront better. And they have to know their value. And again, I really feel in colleges that we are missing this point with women in business.
I do too.
And we have to make this point that you have value. That degree has value. Right off the bat, that degree has value. And we talk about this, and when we're talking about speakers and things like that, right? Your story has value, but it's no different than your degree or your experience. It all has value. And the company has to be able to meet that value, or we don't do it. You don't go to work there. You have to start putting that on yourself. And I think there's been a lot of shift even in dating and relationships, that people focus on know your worth. If he doesn't do this, then he, those sort of things. But we have to translate that into business as well. It's know your worth when you walk in there, and know what you're willing to take and what you're not. And that's what has to start happening, or it's not going to change.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. And that's, like you said, something we don't teach in colleges, and something that you and I are going to work on when we start working on our courses, and, that kind of thing. And I think too, and I'm kind of throwing us for a loop here because I'm kind of going off script for a second, but it just popped in my mind that I think too, part of the problem is being afraid to call a spade a spade. So in other words, saying, like, I have trouble in our generation. I'm 54, right? Almost 55. I have trouble. There's a level of guilt that I feel associated with when I say something like, would you offer a man that salary? Like when you bring it up, right? The elephant in the room, it feels like you're being that person, right? That problem. And so in order for us to not feel like that person, all women kind of have to start making a stand and saying, because if we are, it goes back to that scarcity thing, right? If you're the problem, are you going to get that one seat at the table, And I mean, it's just, and sometimes it's one of those things, kind of like the whole concept of microaggressions, where I don't think people know sometimes the things they are doing. Like, I think there are good employers that would never intend to, to lessen the role of women, or to pay women less, or to give women less, but they just aren't aware of it. And I think it's going to take all of us being a little bolder and saying, is that equitable, and not worry about being the problem because we're worried about losing our position. Like Whitney was saying in the movie Swiped, right? She was afraid to speak up because she didn't want to be the problem. She didn't want to be the one, like a woman, right?
Right.
Things up. And I think that's a challenge. We're just going to have
Mm-hmm.
to, I don't know the answer. You know, maybe we can all figure out the answer together, because it's always that worry in the back of your head. Okay, we're all going to stick together. And then the one
Mm-hmm.
is, okay, y'all stick together, but I'm going to go over here and I'm going to get that one spot.
Right. And I'm going to use you sticking together
Right, right.
make it better for me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the whole the other side of it too, right? Is the queen bee.
Right.
And being the queen bee and being the one who's at the table and what we you have in the show notes is the feminist betrayal,
Right.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
the essay is when women become their own worst enemies.
Mm-hmm.
So, a young woman enters a high profile workplace, excited to work alongside inspiring women,
Mm-hmm.
only to find out that some of those closed ranks or undercut her.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly the tension, we're exploring, that we're talking about how sisterhood can fracture under
Mm-hmm.
pressure. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw one on TikTok that said going from the pet to the threat.
Ah.
And it
Mm-hmm.
kind of resonated with me, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
some of these women, when you come in as a queen bee, and they've also got what they call the tall poppy syndrome, right? As women
Right.
cut down other women who stand out. So
Mm-hmm.
when you have a new hire or someone new to the company that really just like is very intelligent and very, um, you know, a go getter and all of these sort of things, and they jump in and everybody's really excited at first, but
Mm-hmm.
then ones above her start getting concerned
Mm-hmm.
that she's going to take over their spot instead of
Mm-hmm.
saying, okay, well, let me help you do what you need to do. And that goes into
Mm-hmm.
the queen bee effect, right? Senior women distance themselves from junior
Mm-hmm.
women to survive in that male space.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me, when I saw that, pet to threat, I think it's a perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
Because from my perspective, and I know you're the same way, when I have someone that's working with or for me,
Mm-hmm.
them coming up in the ranks at a company, I feel looks great for me.
Right. Right.
Because I don't want to be the smartest in the room. You
Mm-hmm.
surround yourself with people who have the strengths where your weaknesses are. That's the whole point to me in running a good team.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that is what's missing in most of these, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because it's like at different points in my career, I feel like I've been on both sides of that. Like when I was first starting at Troy University, I was subject to many of the queen bees, right? Where I came
Hmm.
in, I was 30 years old, I was in a very senior position and kept growing and growing. And I was subject to that, where I had to deal with that and had to learn to deal with it. And then I've been on the flip side of that, right? And it's just, I
Hmm.
feel like human nature, woman nature, where I have been in a senior position, especially as I've gotten older and someone new comes in and they're younger and they're exciting and they've got this
Hmm.
energy. And I have felt threatened, right? It's
Hmm.
just, I think
Hmm.
to a certain extent, it is natural. And what I'm sitting here thinking as you were talking is like, that's where kind of the opportunity is, right? If we take our
Hmm.
queen bee status and then use that for good and point it out like, hey,
Right.
this is what is creating the competition. This is what is creating the animosity.
Hmm.
The fact that we have these limited seats, right? How are we going to
Right.
fix that? Because if we fix that, you're going to fix the competition. You're going to fix some of that because we don't feel like we're competing for limited
Right.
number of spots, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's important.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, that takes it from, a personal cattiness, because
Right.
that's really not what it is. It's a systemic issue that we
Mm-hmm.
have with the
Mm-hmm.
patriarch. And the
Right.
patriarch is not just men. So
Right.
I want
Correct.
that to be a very clear thing, right? It's not
Mm-hmm.
just men that are creating that.
Right.
And I think sometimes that's a misconception.
Absolutely.
Now, they're the ones who have to help fix it, though.
Correct. That's what Vince was saying, when we had him on,
Hmm.
is we are definitely not, because I've worked with some very supportive men. I've worked with some that were not as supportive as they thought they were, so
Right.
I definitely and you don't either. I know we've talked about this. We have nothing against men. We're not sitting in a corner going, men suck, right? They're all bad. But you're right. And Vince was right. It's going to take men to solve the problem and to acknowledge that there is an issue. And until that happens, we're going to still see these things like stepping on, all the topics we've already talked about, right? Stepping on people way up. We're going to see the not being able to trust sometimes other women. And it's because it's like kill or be killed,
Yes, absolutely.
That whole catch or be caught, right? It's like you put women in that position, whether intentional or not, by limiting the opportunity that is available and saying, okay, there can only be one female star. Then of course you're going to see, it's like a NASCAR race when it restarts with 3 laps left to go after a caution. You're going to see just all out craziness because there's not room for growth for everybody. There's not room for everybody. So there's going to be infighting to get to that spot.
Right. Exactly. And that's what, we talked about too, right? It has to be trained from both sides. So, but it has to start higher up. That training has to start higher up, because until you change the mindset, you're not going to change the pattern. I mean, that's, that's really just, unfortunately, that's the reality of it.
And we've got to stop. I think I'm going to share your other video here. We've got to stop making women feel like they need to choose sides, right? Like they need to, you're either loyal to women or you're loyal to the company. I feel like that is one of the things that happens so often is we make it a this or that, right? Either you're loyal to women or you're loyal to the company. You can't do both.
You can't do both.
Yeah. So you want me to go ahead and play this?
So yeah. So this one caught me off guard. Honestly, I'd never heard of this until I was doing research for the show, and genuinely, this was the name calling. And we saw that with Swiped, right? Where they called her a horse. She walked out, and it was a joke, and no one said anything. And then all of a sudden, she was resigning, even though she wasn't resigning, that sort of thing. And no one's stopping it. Not even women, but no one's stopping the chaos that comes along with when a woman speaks her mind and speaks against something that someone else doesn't agree with in a business scenario, in a personal, all of those things. And so when I was researching, this came up to me and I had never even heard about it.
Do you want me to play it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was debating my bill to lower the cost of groceries for Colorado families. At that time, Representative Armagoss snuck a photo of me for the purpose of ridiculing me. He shared it with all the House Republicans with comments that he subsequently deleted. A number of you made comments about my appearance in that chat. You called me a stripper and a prostitute. Some of you sat silently by. You are complicit too. One of you shared the photo on social media. By the time I made it back to my chair, I was facing an onslaught of harassment. Sexual messages about my appearance, racist messages, threats of rape, threats against me, and the worst, a message with my kid's school address that said, "I know what time pickup is. What's about to happen to them is your fault." Every parent, above all else, wants to keep their kids safe. And in that moment, I felt like I had failed, like I had put my children's lives at risk. But I did not do that. My kids should not face threats to their lives because of an outfit I wore or because I chose to stand here and serve. I spoke with minority leadership, who assured me that she would find out who took the photo. She did not tell me that she already knew, that all of the House Republicans knew. She did not tell me she sent a message to her chat warning them that messages could be public. Minority leadership kept former Representative Armagoss on the Workplace Harassment Committee, knowing that if I were to report this conduct, I would have been reporting it to the very person who started this harassment campaign against me and my family. When it comes to women in this building or who aspire to do this important work, how confident can they be that if they are sexually harassed or worse, that it will be taken seriously. This has been a coordinated harassment campaign, and I know that me speaking about it right now is going to make it worse. But since this story broke, I have heard stories from women across Colorado. My story has resonated with so many people because it is indicative of a greater issue that exists, a culture of violence against women. And I am so disappointed to see women perpetuate that culture. This is a culture that is designed to silence women, but it will not silence me. It will not dictate how I dress. It will not stop me from doing my job. I refuse to sit down and stay quiet because this kind of conduct does not just target me. It sends a message to women in politics everywhere to not run in the first place. And that is exactly why we have to stand against it.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize that.
No, that's okay. No, it's fine. I think, and I think the whole thing to me on this, and this is not about sides or politics, this is about a woman warned other men about something that they were doing wrong, didn't say it was wrong, didn't tell them, you should not do that, this is, that sort of thing. She warned them that other people could see what they were doing. Very similar to what we saw in the movie, right? Where she went into the boardroom with an issue about the pictures and they said, oh, we don't want to make it emotional. And then she figured out a way to spin it, Right. So, to me, that's what that whole clip is about. Number one, we're still calling women derogatory things. Not only is she a Colorado representative, she is a tax attorney. She is not, she's a very.
We're talking about her appearance, so.
We're and so we're talking about her appearance. We're not talking about anything that she's speaking about. We're talking about her appearance. We're talking about these sort of things. And then again, another woman is protecting men. And it dumbfounded me to think that in those types of positions, we should be supporting each other and definitely be supporting those types of communications happening about another woman. But it goes back to what we're saying.
Yep. And, it's part of it, I think, is we have so much these days of our identity tied to our job, right? Because we feel like, if we complain, and something happens, it seems like it's going to be the end of the world because that's our job, and titles. I mean, I'm guilty of that, right? Titles we sometimes are what our title is. And so we feel like if we have a bigger, better title, that we have more value, right? That we are more valuable. I think some of that is just we as women, I think, have to go back or go forward to not putting so much of our identity in lockstep with what we do for a living, right? Because I think that's what part of it is making us make decisions and maybe don't feel true to ourselves because we're afraid we're going to get in trouble at work. We're going to lose that seat at the table. We are going to not get that promotion because she's too feminine. She's too emotional. She's too, and what it's doing is it means that the problems aren't getting better. No one wants to talk about them because, again, you want to be that woman. No one wants to be the one to stand up because then you become the target very often. And I think that is so unfortunate, and it's just got to start somewhere, right? Fixing it's got to start somewhere. And it doesn't have to be nasty or negative. Just, hey, do you think that's appropriate? I think even that would have been a start in that situation. Like, hey, guys, do y'all think that's appropriate? No, not just, people can see that, right?
Right.
Exactly. I get why she was doing that, but I think a better answer would have been, hey, do you think that's appropriate? Because I don't.
Well, and also you're the ethics committee. And, this, because I didn't know anything about any of this or any of them, before I found it. And, you know, as she said, you know, the person that she would have been filing the complaint to was the person doing the situation. Again, back to the same sort of swiped situation, right? It was her boss. That's who she would have been. She was complaining to his best friend. She was complaining about her boss, you know, and it goes back to the, you know, the Cabot thing. If there was a situation where she wasn't comfortable or they chose to break up or whatever, who's she going to go to?
She was HR.
She was HR, and he was her boss. So, you know, so that's the other side of it too, is we, you know, we're in this circular thing where we're not only are we not helping each other, but who's there to help us when you can't?
Right. Yeah. It's such a, I mean, I'm sitting here just kind of lost in thought on this whole thing, because it's one of those things where, you know, I feel like if you told like some people, you know, that this was a problem, right? They'd go, oh, but women have come so far. And yes, true, right? Yes. But but that's kind of where it for me is yes, but there is still room for growth. When you see the numbers don't lie, right? The numbers don't lie. When 3% of C-suite positions are held by women, okay, yes, women are disproportionate slightly, what we learned, right? 46% of the workforce is women, 54% of the workforce is men. That doesn't justify the 3% in C-suite to, you know, it doesn't, right? And it doesn't justify the fact that for every woman who makes $100,000, there are 2.5 men who do, or that the average salary for women in the United States, and this is average salary for professional women, is $54,900, and the average salary for professional men is in the 90s. That's
it's unbelievable.
But right? Yes, but yes, it has come a long way, but there is still plenty of room to go. And I think, you know, call out to all men. I know Vince said he was going to do it, but you're going to men are going to have to come to the table and say, yes, this is a discussion worth having, and not roll their eyes when we have the discussion.
Well, that's exactly it. And oh, look how far you've come cannot be the answer. We're not equal in those scenarios, even though we have equal access to the education. We have the same levels or higher of education. We have more experience. We have all of these things, right? But it cannot, the answer cannot be, even though it is, but look how far you've come. The problem is not how far we've come. The problem is we haven't come far enough in the amount of time that it should.
I mean, 50 years. We're talking about 50 years, and it's barely improved. Improved in the last 50 years. And so that's why, you know, again, it's one of those things where I felt hesitant to bring it up in certain situations throughout my career, because you don't want to be that woman, right? You don't want to be again, because of the scarcity of the seats at the table. But I would say, you know, men, we're not hating on you, but stop rolling your eyes when we bring it up, right? Because it is an issue. And, you know, I mean, how many times, Michelle, have you ever, like, throughout your career, again, we're not talking about our current job, but throughout your career, when you go into a meeting with men, and let's say the people there with you maybe don't know you, do you ever feel like, or have you ever been assumed that you were the secretary, or that you were the lower person on the table, and like you're going to take notes? Or I've had that happen several times.
I've had it happen a lot. Yes. And it's just an automatic assumption. I mean, I was in the military, and I used to get phone calls, and they would ask to speak to a real Marine, you know, because I was a female. They would say, can I speak to a real Marine? I'm like, speaking, but you know, most of them, even in the military, you know, it happens there too. But it's one of those things where you walk in and they just assume, and sometimes even now, even though you're not the secretary, and I'm not saying our current position again, I'm just saying in most recent times, have you ever been in a meeting and people assume when they're like, is somebody taking notes? Oh, will you take notes? Because it's just assumed that the female in the room will be taking notes, in my opinion. That's been my experience.
Yeah. I mean, you know, you were saying even recently, you know, we do work in sort of an industry that is male dominated. And when you know, I came in and I have someone that is on my team who has been with the company longer, who is a little bit older than me. And when he and I go places together, people naturally assume that he is my boss. I mean, it happens over and over and over, not in our workplace, but when we're out and about at like trade shows, that kind of thing. It is frequently assumed that he is my boss, and I don't correct it. He, you know, I mean, whatever, right? But it's just an interesting thing
it
to see
is
in
because it's not anything he's doing.
Right.
You know, that's the other part of it. There's nothing that he's doing to portray that sort of thing, right? Like he doesn't try to come across that way, but that is an automatic assumption that when you walk in, that's who it is.
Yep. And it's not me because, like, you know, I told you about when I went to the one training with Vince where I met Vince, you know, everybody in the room was kind of standoffish at the beginning. Well, you know, after talking, and then later come to find out at dinner is because they thought that I was the CEO. And, you know, which is really cool because I'll tell you why that's cool. Because someone who was senior to me was in that meeting with me from our same company, right? But in that room, it was supplier diversity. And I think it just has to do with the people that were in that room didn't assume that he was my boss. They actually were a little bit more progressive in thought, not politically, but progressive in thought. That they were judging it more on who spoke up, that kind of thing. And, you know, he's not that he's
knowledge based,
right? He's just a laid back guy. And I was much more dominant, but I was also more confident because of the group of people were, you know, forward thinking. We're in an AI workshop. And so, you know, that just kind of is interesting. An interesting thought too is industry by industry. I wonder if it's different and better in some industries. So women who are starting out would probably want to explore those kind of things, right? Is it better in certain industries? I know in psychology it is, right? Most psychologists that graduate or graduating from with psychology degrees in college are now women. And so in psychology, I don't think you have, well, of course, you also end up almost working for yourself, being an entrepreneur. So maybe that's different. But there are industries, I think, where it's harder and industries where it's easier. And so that's something women need to consider coming out of college.
Yeah, agreed. And unfortunately, again, you have to sit back and have a lot of thought about something as opposed to just choosing something that you love.
You want to do, right?
Right. Which men aren't sitting around going, you know, which would work best for me.
Right. Which one's going to be most supportive of me?
Right.
You know? Yeah, that's so true. Have you had incredible like female allies throughout your career who have lifted you up and who have helped you along? I've had one.
So I've had one as well. And it was really the first female boss I ever had. And she was amazing. And she was very much, and I was young, I was in my 20s, and she was just excellent, and taught me a lot. And, you know, I learned very quickly, and she was really good at helping me shine, and finding what I was good at, things like that. But as I got older, and honestly, I had a female boss who had never done her job, and I was training her to do her job. That was difficult, because she'd never worked a day in her life, and got the position. I'm not sure how, but that's a whole other story. But then I also had one who was very good at her job, but she was a queen bee. And she had a team of all women and did not help us shine. She would put herself above us in meetings and do what she could to make herself look better. And it was very interesting to me, because she was, you know, she was probably about 20 years older than me at the time. And it was just very interesting to me because it caught me off guard for someone who had been in the workforce for so long and worked for women, but she wanted that seat at the table more than she wanted anything else. And that was my first true experience with a queen bee.
Yeah.
And it also taught me what I didn't want to be when I was in leadership, though.
Yeah, some of those best lessons come from what we don't want to be. I've had both. I had one at Troy University who was just amazing. She ended up I think she's at University of Maryland, University College now, Dr. Susan Aldridge, if you're out there. She was amazing. She was very supportive, taught me a lot about how to support other women. She was very, feminine, but just very, very good at her job, very supportive. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that she really taught me that has kind of stuck with me is a lot of times, if you're looking to move into senior leadership positions, you are perceived as a better leader, as more of a leader, if you are doing those things, building up other people, because unfortunately, the perception is anybody can do the work, right? It's much more scarce, at least the perception, to find a woman who can manage others who do the work. And that's the perception. So I feel like one of the things Susan taught me is that you are perceived as a better leader, as a better manager when you are bringing up others. And that's kind of what shaped my whole leadership teaching and everything, where I commonly say, you're not a leader if nobody wants to follow, and you're not a leader until you build other leaders. And it came from her. And so she was fantastic. And that's really shaped my entire, view on leadership and about how to be perceived as a leader. But I've also had several that have been the opposite, where they've taken credit for your work. They undermine you. They withhold you back from seat at the table. I've had people give me wrong deadlines. I've had people in my past. I mean, just things here and there, right? That, like you said, taught me what not to do and who I didn't want to be. I've even had one tell me, yes, I'm going to take credit for your ideas because you're on my team, and you'll see, you'll do it too when you get to this position. I can honestly say I've never done that.
Right. And it was always a good thing about, it doesn't matter who gets the credit. We did it as a team, right? It doesn't matter who gets the credit. And honestly, I never really cared about who got the credit, because what I cared about is when they stood up there and said, I put this together, or I did that, instead of saying the team did. Right. Now I'm very much the buck stops with me if there's an issue, but we'll give credit to my team for what they do right.
We know Simon Sinek says that about, good leaders take all the responsibility and give away all the credit. So kudos to you on that. That's a very, very strong indicator of a strong leader, is leaders take the responsibility and give away the credit.
Well, I just feel like that's what we should be doing with other women, and honestly, not just other women, but for me, in my case, it's because my team is right now is all women. And so I will forever support them. I will forever build them up, bring them up. If they want to do something more within the company, I will support that. It's, it's one of those things to me that we're not going to break the cycle until we start teaching other people what it should look like to have those leaders.
Absolutely.
And that's what we've got to do.
No, you're exactly right. And that, that gets us kind of to our wrap up. I'll take the first one, then you can take 2 and 3, because you kind of just, gave us a good preview of that. But the first one I'd say is what I had to learn to do is be aware of, everything starts with self-awareness, right? Be aware of your own sizing up reflex, and that tendency, because we feel those spaces are scarce, those, like I said in the beginning, when I said it without even thinking about it, that seat at the table, like there's one. Be aware of our sizing at reflex, and instead of just, feeling bad about it, or, chastising ourselves, we get enough of that from other areas. Just vow to be better, right? Just vow to, recognize it and say, okay, I need to consciously work on this, because it's, we can't just give in and say, oh, well, I just suck. That's just how I'm going to be. Okay. But be aware of it, and then make a conscious decision to be better about it, even if you have to fake it for a little bit, even if you still feel competitive, if you have to fake it till you make it, but I think that's critical. And then I'll let you take number 2 and 3, because you just kind of, gave a good preview of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, being intentional with your relationships, build intentional relationships with women at work. And that's to me, that is building an intentional relationship is twofold. It's you want to be where that intention is for them to learn what you do, your knowledge, that sort of thing, and for you to learn from them. When I started, I didn't know anything about, building materials when I started here. And everything I've learned about it for the most part has been from my team, from just being right there with them and them showing me how to do, all of these things. And then lead by example, advocate, sponsor, support. I am a big proponent in that. And when I came into the company that we're in now, my team wasn't a team. They were all kind of spread out. And I was able to bring them together, and they are so supportive and advocate for each other so well. And they mentor each other on different things. They have different, again, strengths, different weaknesses, and they work together without me even knowing it or being involved, and to me, that's like that's a high compliment to me, that they're just comfortable just doing that. They handle their business and work together on something they, don't know or need help with, something like that. So that advocating for them is what I did from the very beginning with them, finding out what their needs were, what I could do to make them more successful. And that has, kind of gone into, a situation with them where they want to be more productive, and they're looking at their future because they loved the company. They loved working for the company and what they were doing. They just needed more direction. And that's not to anyone's fault. That's just the way the situation was at the time. So advocate, sponsor, and support is, to me, the core of what we have to do.
100%. And, when we do that too, I mean, it's just kind of natural that, well, being a marketing person, I always talk about the WIIFM, what's in it for me, right? Because anytime we understand our why and we can correlate it to self-interest, unfortunately, it's just the way people are, it is easier to kind of make change. So if someone is out there needing to make that change, right? One of the WIIFMs of that is that when you do that, when you build those relationships, when you advocate, sponsor, and support, you're much less likely to find someone that is going to stab you in the back or that is going to do things that are non-trustworthy, because you become, even if not real friends, you become friendly. And it's harder to do that when you've nurtured that relationship, right? And so it's definitely behooves everybody to do those things, to build those relationships, nurture that network, advocate, sponsor, and support, and then get identity and meaning, outside of our job, right? Build hobbies, really focus on family, and then maybe even, work on a side hustle where you can be the boss, where you can be the one in charge, because that's going to build confidence all the way around, right? It's going to build the skill sets that you need to advance in business. So I think, doing those things, really building that identity and making sure that it's not totally dependent on position at work or having that seat at the table is going to make it easier on everyone, especially when it comes to trust and supporting other women, because then again, you're not feeling like everything rides on getting that seat or getting that one promotion. It becomes just a thing. It just becomes part of the bigger picture of who you are.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, having your identity outside of work is huge, and not something that truly was a thing for our generation growing up, honestly. We were kind of taught that you're a workaholic or you're not here.
That was a positive thing.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, I think that's a big thing to have that outside stuff. For me, anytime you would go in for an interview or a conversation and someone says, "What's your hobby?" I didn't have, my kids, that
Yeah. I wonder if they ask that still. I don't know.
I don't
Do you think?
know. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. But ultimately, I mean, it starts with us. Men have to step up to the table too, and other women. But we just really all. I think for me, like I look at it, and I want to be the leader that I wish I had, and that I did have in my early career. I want to be the woman that supports other women, because if we aren't, really actively putting in that effort to do it, then how do we expect it from anyone else, right?
Right. No, and that's true. And we have to, that's where it has to start. I mean, we have to make that effort every time, somebody makes an effort. That's just that much closer to where we need to be.
Yeah, and because if we can't trust each other, right? If women are out here backstabbing each other and are stepping on each other up the ladder, then how can we expect others to trust us in leadership? Because that's not very leader worthy, right? Good leaders don't do that kind of thing. Kind of goes back to what you're talking about. Leaders build other leaders, and men recognize that instinctively, and if we're not doing that, we're going to limit our own leadership.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely.
Anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
I don't think so. Thanks everybody for listening. If you watch this, we want to hear your opinion.
Starts with us, and men, if you're out there, if you happen to be listening, what can you do? Think about what you can do. And I would say number one is, when these topics come up, don't eye roll. Don't say, oh, don't be that woman, right? Realize it's not about not supporting men or not liking men or not appreciating men. It's about wanting to get that same level of appreciation and respect.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thanks, Michelle. I hope you have a good night. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.